Well, today, for one of the many things we're going to record while we are all in Phoenix together, we're going to talk about the first movie. We're going to talk about Into the Spider-Verse, which we watched last night. I hadn't seen it before. Mm-hmm. And tonight we're going to go see Across the Spider-Verse. We'll talk about it tomorrow and upload a full video analyzing it.
Yeah, we're just going to smash them together. This is the start of our 6-part series.
Yes.
On the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
We could probably do a 10-part series on the Spider-Verse, honestly.
We could, and potentially we will, but not in this version of the multiverse.
Exactly. Well, I guess since it was my first time seeing it, I'll go first with my opinions.
Please. Did you see it when it came out?
Yeah, absolutely.
So you guys got to see it in theaters?
No,
I've seen it multiple times since it came out.
Nice.
So Will's seen it multiple times since it came out. I saw it for the first time when the pandemic hit.
Okay.
Or just before, because I didn't realize I'd missed the train on it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then everybody said how good it was.
Yeah.
So, you not only saw it for the first time, you basically had no context for any of it, so you had to see it completely raw.
Yeah, I hadn't really seen any spoilers or anything like that. I'd seen the trailer when it came out, and I have a hard time getting into animated stuff. I prefer live action, and it's funny because I don't know what element realism depiction plays in there, because I don't mind movies with heavy CGI, so in the words of John Mulaney, we don't have time to unpack all of that. But this movie immediately gripped me with the writing and the tone and the unique animation, and I was just enthralled the whole movie. So it was 10 out of 10 for me. I loved it. Mm-hmm. The way they wrote the characters, the voice performances, and the animation, just the way it fixated on characters and their emotions as the story went on, I thought it was great. So I loved it.
Yeah, and I think, part of the strength of that movie is that since it is animated, and they took full advantage of that, there's a ton of characterization that you see through the different effects within the film, within the characterization of all of the different casts, and the melding of not just different versions of the characters, but even wholly different styles of animation coming together and blending in a way that you can only do in an animated film.
Yeah.
Well, and my favorite part about this, as me and Will specifically are huge old school comic book fans, is the fact that it is so much love was made into making every frame of this movie look like you could pause it and it would come straight out of a comic book.
You said that at the start of the movie, and as I was watching, I was like, "You are 100% spot on."
Oh yeah, it's the way the dynamic shots were, and they still made a way to make action really fluid and everything. But if you look close in the fact, the colors being screen toned, the fact that in order to draw focus on something or to show what a character's eyeline is, things that are out of focus have that old school comic book things where the red, yellow, and green.
Yeah, the chromatic aberration.
Yeah,
exactly. There's all these little things in the background. After Miles Morales gets bit by a spider, you're seeing his speech bubbles, and he addresses that. It's a fourth wall break that Deadpool would have been proud of.
Yeah,
and that's one of the best. That's one of the coolest things about the movie is that it very much treated itself like it was a comic book.
Yeah, but
also took the extra it wasn't just tone; it went for the full aesthetic. And it nailed it.
Yeah, it part of the strength there is that it respected what came before it and respected the genre that it's paying tribute to in a way that a lot of other movies based on superheroes or comic books or other type of pulp media just doesn't. You see this a lot where they almost are embarrassed that they have this camp to them.
See the Transformers movies for movies made by a director who hates the source material.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Josh, I hear one of your least favorite movies of all time is actually Transformers: Dark of the Moon.
I'm never living that down.
Was it Dark of the Moon, or what's the?
I believe it was.
Or was it? Which one?
I think it was Dark of the Moon. No, because it was Transformers:
Revenge of the Fallen. That's it. Because that's the one where Spock's the bad guy, right?
It's been so long, I don't even remember.
It's hard to say. They're the first, almost, well, I shouldn't say the first one. Most of the Transformer movies have just been terrible.
I just remember great tangent away from Into the Spider-Verse.
Yes.
But I just remember watching the first Transformers movie and being mad that it was mostly about Shia LaBeouf
Yes.
instead of about transforming robots.
Now, just to explain to the audience why we're all laughing uproariously at this, is that I think all of us here in 2023 would agree that the Transformer movies are not excellent in multiple ways, but younger me, who was not as nuanced and wise as I am now, I liked the Transformers movies, and I think the biggest thing, though, to give credence to your point, is that I had never played with Transformers growing up. I'd never seen any of the shows. I had no knowledge of the source material. So I went in and I saw a pseudo sci-fi lowbrow action movie, which at the time I was like a teenager, so I was lowbrow. So it very much appealed to me, and I was like, cool. And the reason that it's funny is that our mutual friend hated the third Transformers movie, and I really liked it. I was like around 2021 when that came out, and I was like, this is a good movie. And our friend Adrian was like, that movie sucks. And he gives me crap about it to this day, deservedly. And so
as somebody who's like, here's the thing though, you were actively in film school at the time.
Which, that's a whole different tangent, because I was at CU Boulder's film school, which is not involving production. It was basically film criticism. So we would watch the most esoteric art house movies and then talk about why those are the pinnacle of storytelling and everything you see in a theater is not. And it made me very polarized to where I was like, I got in a big argument with my film teacher about why Battle Los Angeles was an excellent film. And I went back and watched that a couple years ago, and I was like, I've grown a lot as a person. But at the time,
I feel like I need to move away from you.
The time, it made sense. I'm like sweating nervously in shame now.
Well, here's the thing. I have this very poignant image in my head of you watching the most obscure art film ever, and it's you sitting in like the bucket seats and like the projector going, and it's just somebody holding a strawberry and slowly bringing it up to the lens and mushing it into the lens.
That would have been better than what we watched.
and
Some of the stuff.
Professor turning it off and being like, explain how this is a metaphor for communism. Like,
yeah, it was stuff like that, and it was too much. And I think older me would have been able to find elements of those things I liked now that I've grown as a person. But I mean, at the time, I was barely out of high school. I was a teenager, and I was super into religion at the time. Not to take it to another tangent. So my critical thinking and overall life viewpoint was kind of skewed heavily by that. So yeah, I was kind of set up to fail in that regard. But again, now that I've gotten older and I've heard from people who really like the Transformers source material, and I see how much they deviate. I mean, around that same time, the same person we're talking about, who has unfortunately passed me, that same person thought the G.I. Joe movies were fucking cool. And then my friend at the time, who was super into G.I. Joe and Transformers, told me all about the source material and all the changes they made, and I was like, oh yeah, if I was a fan of that stuff, I'd be pissed off too.
Well, not to defend Josh too much, but I think I did enjoy... I did like the first X-Men movie when that came out, but I was like 8.
Yeah, true. To get us back onto the slightly back on the rails to reel us back in. Speaking of religious figures, Nicolas Cage and the rest of the voice cast in this movie.
Yes.
And you even brought up John Mulaney right up front.
I did. I'm a big John Mulaney fan.
We were looking over the voice cast, which I remember looking this up at the time because I'm always a huge nerd for who is voice acting, and here's one of the things I like about it. I'm gonna have to look him up. The kid who played Miles Morales is actually elevated as the main character because nobody who is a big name or another voice actor overshadows him.
True.
He's excellently emotive when it comes down to voice. He's great when he comes down to like his expression. He really comes across as excellent. And everybody around him who is a character is excellently emotive as a voice actor.
Yes.
And they're all really good. I mean, voice acting is acting. and they all did a really great job with it. Even the people like again, I'm going to bring up Nicolas Cage. He has like 4 or 5 lines as Spider-Man Noir, and he fucking crushes them. They're really good.
Oh, and I think they did a really good job where they had these big name cameos almost, but like you said, everyone was so focused on serving the overall narrative of the movie, which is Miles Morales' origin story, which I do want to talk about, segue from this in a minute to talking about how it was a really refreshingly original origin story compared to so many other superhero origin stories. But other than Nicolas Cage and John Mulaney, I think that they were so focused on that had I not looked it up beforehand, I wouldn't have known that Liev Schreiber was Kingpin. I wouldn't have probably even picked up Chris Pine as the very first Peter Parker we encounter. You have so many big name voice actors, including even Jake Johnson was different enough from stuff I've seen him in, that if I hadn't known that going in, I probably wouldn't have picked it up because I'd be just so drawn into the story. And then I would definitely hear Nicolas Cage and John Mulaney when they come on because they have very distinct voices. But it really didn't detract at all. And as we were watching, especially, I know you guys were mentioning it, that you were seeing things in the background that you hadn't noticed. There's so many delightful Easter eggs, but they don't subtract or overshadow the main narrative at all, which is a really good thing to resist, especially in animation where it's so much easier to put Easter eggs in a way than it is in live action.
That's kind of the great thing that, like...
The camera made a noise. Stand by. All right, guys, we are back. We are recording after some issues have been resolved. Thank you, guys.
Yes. This will be so we've actually changed dimensions to we are now Earth 616. Josh, Carey, and Will, and we all have essentially the same origin story as the ones you're familiar with, but we're now slightly older.
Yes.
Oh God, you're right. It's happening.
No, it happened.
The question isn't where are we, but when are we?
When it happened? Now. We'll go back to then.
But that's now, sir. Now is now. Now was then. Shout out to Mel Brooks.
Just
well, let's talk about how this was a really unique origin story for a hero, because I knew that going into this movie, and I don't know the specifics, but I know that Miles Morales was already established in the comics as taking over the mantle of Spider-Man, having similar but different powers. And this was the first, I think, adaptation, though, of his origin story. And I thought it was excellent because, I mean, the first thing I think of when I hear an origin story is Batman. I've seen his goddamn origin story a million times, and I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And then I really liked how in the MCU with Tom Holland.
Where do you know that name?
Oh, where do you know that name?
I mean, well, here's the thing. So I know what you're going for. We've seen the same thing with Spider-Man at this point.
Yes.
Because everybody knows the origin story at this point because the Sam Raimi Spider-Man did it so well.
Right.
It did it really well. It made it iconic. It really burned it into everybody's memory.
Yes.
Aside from what is burned into my memory, which is the Macho Man Randy Savage going, "Bonesaw is ready." Fucking absolutely killing it. And Bruce Campbell as the announcer. Shout out to my boy Bruce.
Of course.
But
don't you mean Papa Pizza?
Papa Pizza? Yeah. Hey. Fucking yes. So the Sam Raimi movies. The long story short, the Sam Raimi movies did it really well.
Yes.
And then, because Sony didn't know what the fuck they were doing, they just did it again.
But with Andrew Garfield.
But worse with Andrew Garfield. Andrew Garfield, who was ostensibly a pretty fucking good Spider-Man, but, the movies just, they didn't know what the fuck they wanted to be, and so, even the sequel to, the first one was and the second one just ended up being a 2-hour-long trailer, and it fucking killed everybody in that. Mm-hmm. But, and this was another, I think that's why I didn't go see this in the theaters. This was another Spider-Man origin story, and I didn't want to see it.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is they used that as a jumping off point to say, you already know the story, and just throw flavor on it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it became such a good recurring bit through the movie that it was literally
for Spider-Verse, you're saying.
For the Spider-Verse,
for
Into the Spider. It became symbolism for Miles' journey.
Yes. This is just to let you know that from here on out, we do discuss spoilers. So, spoiler alert for the 2018 Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Spoiler alert. Well, because Miles' journey, I like that it was tied to him meeting the Peter Parker Spider-Man of his universe, kind of getting a mission, a call to action, to put it in old story terms. But he gets that, and then he goes on his own unique, very emotional, very interesting journey, and it's very compelling. And it's all about Miles. It's not about there's other Spider people who play roles in that, but it's very much Miles' story. So it acknowledges all the stories that have happened before and around him, but it focuses on him. I thought that was really well done.
Yeah. And I think they also, the transition between him not being Spider-Man and, actually embracing Spider-Man, on rewatching, it happens really fast. From one scene to another, it's basically 30 seconds of on-screen time, but they build up to that so well that when you actually do have that transition where he takes that leap to being Spider-Man, it just feels so earned.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
because he's had to go through not being in full control of his powers and wanting to do the right thing but not being able to. He's made mistakes, he's failed. His friends that he's just made are going and doing their own thing. He's lost his uncle, spoiler alert. He's had that heart-to-heart with his dad where he couldn't even answer, he just heard it. That was a really emotional scene through the door. That was really and so it felt like he went through all the steps, so when he finally shows up and is invisible and just hits Doc Ock in the face, I was like, yes!
And here's the best part about it. The whole movie's theme is great expectations.
Yes.
They say it. It's a great theme for the movie. He has expectations. Everyone knows he's smart. But he just kind of wants to be with his friends. His parents had these expectations. His dad specifically has these expectations for him. He's caught between, his kind of straight-laced police officer who seems like a generally friendly guy dad. His mom, but she's like a paramedic. She's she's the ER nurse, and so there's expectations there. Then he's got superpowers, and he doesn't even get a chance to enjoy, except for a couple moments of glee, the fact that he has superpowers.
Yeah.
Because he's one of 6 spider people, and when he actually runs into all the spider, first he's looking for a mentor, someone to actually teach him, somebody who doesn't want to, because it really freaks him out. In Peter B. Parker is voiced by Jake Johnson, who fucking crushes it.
Yes.
Spider-Gwen, who is much more of a peer, but also is...
Because she's only been the Spider-Man for this, she said, almost 2 years.
2 years,
world,
but she's also very competent. She's in that she's in a very good, kind of peak Spider-Man range, or Spider-Woman range. But then, throw in all these other Spider people, and we're about to go into the climactic finale, and again, it's all this pressure. And it's all this pressure to be someone. To be someone that fits into the mold that is what all these people expect, as opposed to Miles actually being able to be himself and be his own Spider-Man.
Which I think is a very meta commentary on, reinventing an existing character and kind of the pressures of appealing to an established fandom and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very good... you can take it as... I definitely think the narrative they were going for, and the takeaway was about personal responsibility and who you want to be as a person, especially with the quotes at the end of "we can all be heroes," or that's a very generous paraphrasing, but yeah. But you can also take it, in terms of looking at franchises and established canon and all those different things, so... It's cool.
It's broadly or narrowly applicable, and it very much is a... I think it's something that everyone who has had any great thing expected of them, any big thing expected of them, can really vibe with, because especially when when there's all those when all the Spider variants are all telling him what he needs to do, that's overwhelming, especially when you don't. But when you have the ability to do something, but you can't on command yet, or you're not honed, you're not ready for something, but also knowing that you want to rise to the occasion, you have to rise to the occasion, but also not knowing when you're ready for something. I think it's and the fact that comes through, it's really well written. Congrats to Chris Miller and Phil Lord
They were producers on it, and I think they helped with the screenplay, but there were other writers involved. I don't
and there was
give them mention. Yeah.
Well, and there were 3 directors for the movie too, who were all fantastic. Editing Josh had Siri saying that I said smart things.
We're gonna cut to me just with a really awkward close up, just reading from IMDb. Everyone who contributed to the script,
which I think sounds amazing.
Yes.
So
we'll make it happen.
Just in a dark room with a candle, reading from IMDb.
Spider-Man: Into the Spider-Verse was directed by Rob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman. It was written by Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman, and there were many other producers and people involved.
Well, this is a little behind baseball. That's actually how films get made, is just people read off all of the credits to the movie in a smoke-filled dark room top of summoning circles, and then the film just appears.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Shamik Moore, Jake Johnson, Haley Steinfeld, Mahershala Ali, Brian Tyree Henry, Lily Tomlin, Luna Lauren Velez, Zoe Kravitz, John Mulaney, Kimiko Glenn, Nicolas Cage, Catherine Hahn, Liev Schreiber, Chris Pine, Natalie Morales. After the Hollywood executives sacrifice a child to Satan.
Well, of course.
Of course. You can't skip that step, you know.
You can't skip that step.
It goes without saying.
And then, obviously, and I would like to say this is completely real, 5 people, none of whom are under the age of 85, are kidnapped from the closest retirement home and sit down to watch the movie, and then they're the ones that actually give it the MPAA reading. So that is entirely true, and I will not hear different. No citations needed.
Yes, facts.
Absolutely.
It's actually a little bit too close to what I've actually heard this shit is, where they want to fucking tank a movie. But
we should do a deep dive later on the MPAA and the Comic Book Code Authority, because or did I get that name right?
Yes, the Comic Book Code Authority, which also ties into a lot of the history of these characters.
In a big way. And the reason that you don't need those stamps anymore is basically because Stanley gave the finger to that little tacit agreement.
Yes, because Stanley was awesome. Very good pioneer.
We all love Stanley.
We all do.
Yes. Or else.
Or else. Now, this video might potentially cut off in a second, or it might not if we fix the settings correctly, but I think this is a great moment to say we are going to go record some other content and also see Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse tonight. We will do a part 2 segment that will begin momentarily for you watching this with our thoughts on that.
Yeah. Now for a word from our sponsors.
Who's our sponsors? We need sponsors really badly. Ah, yes.
Everybody.
Welcome to Nerds and Friends. We have now seen Across the Spider-Verse.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Coming to you from Universe 992.
995.
995. Oh, man.
We rolled the dice for it beforehand. So,
and this may be the correct universe.
It just might be. Now, we gushed for the last 25 minutes on this podcast about Into the Spider-Verse, and I think we've all been to the consensus that Across the Spider-Verse was equally as good. Do you guys think better, not as good as the first? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I do have to say, I think they're actually in their own kind of spheres when it comes down to that.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I don't think better or worse quite works as a concept. They're definitely both different, and they're trying to do different things. This one, are we already hitting spoilers?
Oh yes, we already reiterated spoilers for Into the Spider-Verse. Now we're giving you the spoiler alert for Across the Spider-Verse.
Yeah,
absolutely. They're both really good movies, and I think I'll say what I said right after we got out of it and we were talking about it.
Yeah.
The closest thing I can say to describe the way this movie felt, because it's long, it's almost 2.5 hours long as far as runtime goes. The leave-off feels to me, in a very good way, the way that the Matrix Reloaded left off back in 2003. With
was it that long ago?
It was that long ago.
Whoa,
with
man.
13-year-old me sitting at the theater, and like when that fucking big twist dropped that Neo was out and unconscious next to the real world guy that Smith had taken over. It's that kind of a drop in a good way.
Yes.
And it simultaneously is like really jam packed, but also doesn't feel terribly rushed to me. Mm-hmm. I really liked how it turned out, and everything that was good about the first one is kind of like expanded upon in this one, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that the thing that I was asking if we were doing spoilers is because this is now the first of a 2-part sequel.
Yeah.
And so, like, it doesn't necessarily have a satisfying conclusion that we can really draw through. We're literally cutting, like, partway through the story right as the stakes are amping up, so...
Yeah.
But
it still felt like
fucking did.
They sure did.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness! But it still felt like a satisfying view, even though you don't get a satisfying conclusion, which is a very hard thing to pull off for a movie.
Yeah,
agreed.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, the best thing I can say about the movie is that, like, it's 2.5 hours, and I wanted more.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd been sitting in the movie theater forever, and I didn't care because I just wanted to see what happens. And that's the highest praise I can possibly give.
Whatever the part 3 ends up being, I think that these two movies, which is going to be Across the Spider-Verse and Beyond the Spider-Verse, are going to be something that you absolutely can marathon.
Yes.
And that's in a good way. And it really seems like they did a great expansion upon like the two characters that you really wanted to focus on in this movie were Gwen and Miles.
Yeah.
And
do that they did.
Yeah, and in a great way that was, it showed how their worlds were clashing.
Yeah. And
how they were not communicating something that was like actually intensely important in the way that I mean, for God's sake, it felt like you saw every. I mean, they probably did. You saw every variant of Spider-Man that's been in cartoon, in media, in live action, all in this like hub of the Spider-Verse.
Yeah. In
a way, which I have opinions like there's a little bit of that's my only slight detraction.
Was too much of it?
No. Okay, so I don't know if this... I don't really care if this is unpopular opinion or anything. I do like the multiverse when it's done well. Case in point, I fucking adore Everything Everywhere All at Once. I absolutely adore it. Mm-hmm. But there is something to me that the hub of variants of the same person all in the same place... It does feel a little tired, even though we haven't seen it too much. And I'm thinking specifically the fact that it was like a big plot point in Rick and Morty, where like you saw like the whatever that is, the Alliance of Ricks or whatever. Yeah. And at that point, I'm like, I'm not sure I want to see this and everything. But here was where Across the Spider-Verse fucking pulled it out. They were actually unique individuals that had, like, some of it was gag, like, some of it was legit. Everything was diverse and interesting in a way that, like, I don't think that the Rick and Morty, like, comedy shtick pulled off. And the fact that Miles is an anomaly, and I have theories about the fact that Gwen is a fucking anomaly, too. In this, actually, I think really, the fact that we're actually following Miles is a huge plus to that, and the fact that he already has a touch point with Peter B. Parker. I think there's a lot of things like when it so that's I guess what I'm saying and like saying it out loud. When it popped up, I was prepared to not like the movie from then on, because I was like, I don't want to see this tired thing done over again.
Okay.
But the way that they put together a multiverse and what is essentially the same dude across multiverses was phenomenal.
Yeah.
You know, stand up being
Yeah.
Spider-Punk, but you know.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the antithesis, because like you mentioned Rick and Morty with the all of the League of Ricks, I forgot what they call it in universe, along the infinite finite curve, or whatever they called it. I forgot. It's been a minute since
Something
I watched
that
Rick and Morty.
sounds both smart and dumb.
Yes.
Because isn't that comedy?
Yeah.
Is it though?
I don't subscribe to what you just said, but okay.
But yeah, so it's you have, instead of like Rick and Morty where you have a whole bunch of Ricks with a couple that are just like weird and different, and instead
But for the
you
rest,
have,
they're
like,
mostly uniform, right? I haven't seen the episodes. So
yeah, there's just a ton of like the same guy, and then just like a couple that are like, oh, this one's Fun Rick, this one's Clown Rick. Whereas in Into the Spider-Verse, they're all weird.
unique. There was really no carbon copies, which is nice, but
Yeah, the closest thing to the carbon copies are when we see like the one from the cartoon, or the other cartoon, or the third cartoon.
yeah.
But those are like vastly different characters, because like they have different animation styles and different personalities.
Well, and not just animation styles. They expanded on something from Into the Spider-Verse that I thought was already like excellent. I think it canonically makes sense. So like in this one, because they're like stabilized to be in different dimensions,
Right, they have a little
because they're wrist, like they don't have to necessarily fit into the art style of the world that they're in, as opposed to Into the Spider-Verse, where like the only real outliers were like I mean, Spider-Man Noir and Spider-Ham were kind of like outliers. I mean,
to a small degree.
Yeah, and so was Penny Parker, but all those characters were also, you know, glitching out pretty hard.
True.
They took that to like the extreme, especially with Spider-Punk, who at any point you could pause the movie and zoom in on him, and he looks like a Sex Pistols album.
Yeah.
And as a fan of old school punk, I fucking loved that.
That was
also
really cool.
Daniel Kaluuya,
Yes,
as the
amazing
voice, crushed it.
Yes.
Like I talked about how much I love Nicolas Cage in the last one as a religious figure, but Daniel Kaluuya dropped one-liners so well.
It's a metaphor for capitalism.
Oh, straight up. What's that? It's a metaphor for capitalism. Fucking like destroyed it, and he did such a good job of like being a character that you were set up to like not like, and just immediately fell in love with him.
Yes.
I was like, how are you cooler under the mask? He's so good.
Yes.
I was this cool the whole time.
I wanted to segue from here because we've covered a lot of what's awesome about that movie. And I like that we talked about, because I saw both movies for the first time back to back, whereas you guys had some time to let the first one marinate on you. But Will, last night you mentioned about the art style. I'd love to hear your talk about that as an illustrator. Some more of the thing that was a little bit of a criticism from your point of view.
Yeah, so my criticism of the new movie is they do kind of push like the way that they have the varying art styles separated, especially in the Gwen Stacy world, a little too far in some of the things where the color completely shifts and the background disappears. And I get what that's referencing with that type of style in the actual comics, but I feel like it doesn't work as well on screen as it does as a storytelling method in the comics, where you're using that to try to set the mood or the tone or convey the emotion. But you have other tools for that, and the big difference between like a movie and a comic is, with the comic you have the single panel that you can analyze, and you're contrasting that with the other panels on the page, versus on the big screen, this is just a frame of the movie and it continues on, and you have music, you have voice acting, and it's transitioning from one frame to another to a different scene. And I don't feel like having just like blowing out the background with all white and a halo effect around the character works as well to convey that in an actual piece of cinema as it would just in the panel of a comic.
Now you see, I'll detract and disagree. I actually really liked that with Gwen's story, and the way that her world was portrayed, because they used I think they used the color palette really well to like also convey her emotions. Like, she's blue and she's like definitely more down and depressed. When you see her hug her father and like
you got whites and pinks brightening up the foreground,
slowly spreading out and like taking over the frame. I do like that there was really distinct color language. I liked that they really blew it out specifically for Gwen. I thought it fit the scenes really well. But I also I really like that sort of impressionist thing, like that interpretation. I'm also like a sucker for lighting and everything like that. But also you know what it reminded me of, and I don't know if it's the same writer. It reminded me of the Jessica Jones Jones comics.
Absolutely,
in a huge way, because the Jessica Jones comics are like, they're very, and that's very noir influenced itself. They're very starkly in solid color block.
Yeah, and you're Alias.
Alias, yeah, and you're focusing on what's going on on the face or in the motion. And I think the interesting thing about adding the color being Gwen's perspective on a situation really did I liked how it elevated the drama in a way. But I also see what you're going for. It could be a little bit too much at times.
Yeah. And I mean it definitely worked well to separate out the different worlds. I'm just not quite a fan of how it worked overall in the world, but I think it did kind of help with the different animation styles to have an entire world that changed the animation style in that we actually spend some time in. That's not just the cutaway gag for the Lego world, or just having a character who's always in black and white, or always an album cover, or
always Medici level Renaissance schematic artwork.
Yeah, and by having the whole world as a different style like that, it definitely helps normalize the kind of jarring effect that you might be seeing otherwise. Kind of like how we are all animated in different ways. I have these bands so that my hands can be animated separate from my arms, and we can save on the animation money.
It does save money.
Yeah.
And my hat is specifically so when I fall, they don't have to animate the hair flying up, because I'm still actually in 8-bit.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean,
it's like the dots on a green screen. Yeah, it's efficient.
Yeah,
it's efficient.
We have to save money wherever we can. We already have,
because we need sponsors.
Josh is actually the most complex model out of us, because he's more recent. He's actually created in Blender.
Yes,
yeah,
it's true.
We couldn't even afford a second hand for Carey.
I'm only supposed to be filmed from the left side.
Who framed this shot? Where's our director of photography?
I'm a very poor port from Cubism.
That was way funnier than it should be. Well, there goes our fan.
There goes our one fan who just shuts the computer. It's you know what? Fuck this.
It's over. It's done.
By the way, I quit.
By the way, I quit. I gotta say, one thing that is nice is that theaters have improved a lot, because I think this is the first time I saw a movie where I sat in the very front row of the theater and didn't hate the experience visually. Yeah, because of the reclining seats, it actually elevated it, I think.
Yes,
actually, yeah, because you were really in there, especially for how kinetic so much of this animation was. Because here's the thing. You'd think you'd be kind of sick of watching Spider-Man swing at this point after having seen it, but they did They did a good job of making it really playful.
Yes.
Doing it in different styles, and like even making the way each of the characters move so visually distinct.
Mm-hmm. Those upside down scenes early on in the movie were
so
beautiful
good.
with Gwen and Miles.
Yeah,
Yes.
and
That was just, the way they had the cityscape back there. I was like, this is art.
And
that
then,
was incredible.
Like the forced perspective in the chase scene.
Yeah.
That was just absolutely spectacular. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you can really only do in animation. And I think, honestly, this Across the Spider-Verse is just a testament to how good a movie can be in animation.
It goes back to, so that it lines up with Alan Moore's philosophy. Okay? Mm-hmm. So Alan Moore, when he talks about comic books, he's very much like, it's a comic book. It shouldn't just be a script and a storyboard for a fucking movie. You need to play with the medium in a way that you can only do with a comic book. And I really think that Into the Spider-Verse is playing with a story only in a way that you can with animation like this.
Absolutely.
And computer generated animation of that, where you can put in live action elements.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point. You read my mind. I was going to say there's 2 live action cameos. Mm-hmm. One of them they cut to a live action world, and one is a live action person where everything else is animated. What did you guys think of those?
I thought that was absolutely spectacular. Seeing Donald Glover? Yeah.
Yes.
Almost said Danny Glover.
Childish Gambino.
Yes. Yeah. In the flesh.
He's a true Renaissance man. That man, just anything he touches turns to gold.
Yes.
Acting, writing, producing, music, everything.
Yes.
I like to think that he kept the costume, and we're going to see it on Atlanta at some point.
I would love that. That would be amazing.
Be absolutely hysterical.
Yes.
Oh, man.
That was very cool.
Just going into my fantasies of like the only thing on my contract is like, oh yeah, you can pay me less, but I want to keep the costumes.
Right. I'd do it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and like I do hope, since I already went through all the trouble of making the costumes in the next like live action Spider-Man movie, we've been waiting since the first one to see the Prowler.
It's true. Mm-hmm. There we go. Donald Glover.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then the other, like, they had some clips from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man, which
and the Andrew Garfield one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and
that was I like the archival footage use. That was cool.
The archival footage use was actually good.
Carey, you made a great point while we were on our little technical difficulty hiatus, which is our thing now.
I don't know what technical difficulties you could possibly be talking about.
Yeah, they're non-existent. Absolutely, we haven't cut to that multiple times during this podcast episode at all.
I think we're doing it so well. We're on to technical proficiencies.
Ah,
yes. Happy little accident, if you will.
So during our technical accident break, Carey, you brought up a great point though about the different worlds that have been explored in other mediums and them bringing them into the Spider-Verse. If you'd like to elaborate on that.
I wanted to bring up the point that like this is also a movie that, just like Into the Spider-Verse, there's so much care that's been put into everything about the way everything's animated.
Yes.
Like the voice acting, the way the characters are depicted, interesting turns on characters, like the whole way down. But one of the things that I appreciated as a kid who grew up watching the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon in the 90s. Yeah. The follow-up to that, which was Spider-Man 2099, played by the absolutely unfairly delicious Oscar Isaacs, and including what was it? Is the and reading Ultimate Spider-Man comics, the Brian Michael Bendis ones growing up.
Yeah.
How much care went into making those worlds look the way they're depicted on other media. Cool. Like specifically, there's a lot of time spent in the literally swinging around the world of Nueva York in Spider-Man 2099, and it felt familiar.
That's cool.
Mm-hmm. If you had watched that show, because I watched that follow-up to The Amazing Spider-Man, and I loved it. Much like the X-Men animated series, there was a lot that didn't make any fucking sense, but I didn't care. I was 9?
Probably younger. You would have been 5.
Between 5 and 9, because the way that all that stuff all was on reruns.
Oh wow! I remember specifically a little behind the scenes here. My favorite comic book character is Iron Man, and I have loved Iron Man since November 26th, 1995, when Iron Man appeared on the animated Spider-Man television show with his fucking suitcase suit.
And
I was 4, for the record.
That would do
oh,
it.
right. I would
Yeah.
Actually, I was 4 as well, because that's before my 5th birthday.
Typically, for most, the 4th does come before the 5th.
Yes.
As you said, 1995.
Yes. 1995.
I would have been 5, almost 6.
Right.
So.
So, now that you know how old we are, yeah, and so like, it's that nostalgia from like when I was 5, or I would have been like what 7 or 8 by the time we got to Spider-Man 99
and
or 2099.
And I think I'll add to that elevated nostalgia. This isn't just the remember that.
Yeah.
This is actually giving you worlds that feel lived in because you have seen it, and like
They're telling you a new story in that world, though.
exactly
Totally see what you mean.
New stories, and I think that's a really cool way of putting it.
Yeah, and I considered after we watched this movie going back and watching some of Spider-Man 2099, but then I remembered a lot of that show, if not all of it, is in CG, and 90s CG is absolutely horrific to look at, and I've made the decision for myself that my mental health doesn't need that.
No. Wise choice.
I'm just gonna keep imagining that it's Oscar Isaacs as Miguel O'Hara, and we're just gonna go from there.
Yeah, and so as soon as they blew out the window there, you see the city. Immediately, my brain is thinking, I know this city exactly. I've been there. I've seen this show. This looks exactly like I remember it being, whether or not it actually does.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Exactly. Do you want to go into final thoughts?
Let's go into final thoughts. I think for me, seeing both these movies for the first time over the last 48 hours, I thought they were excellent. And as I said earlier in the podcast, I have a hard time getting really roped in by animated stuff, which we can do a whole deep dive another time about why that is for me. But I was deeply enthralled by these movies. It was just, again, the excellence in every facet of the filmmaking, from the writing, the voice acting, the animation, all of it it really roped me in, and I was just along for the ride. And normally, for watching a longer movie like that without breaks or distractions, can be a little difficult for me with ADHD, but I was just in, and it felt quick. And like, we talked about how the second movie especially is pretty long, but it did not feel long, which I was like, wow, this is great. So, like 10 out of 10 for me. I loved it, so...
Yeah, like I said, anytime I sit through a 2.5 hour movie and I'm at the end and I'm wanting it to keep going, I can't give the movie any higher praise. Go watch it. It's well worth your time.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you've already heard me gush about a lot of this, but like, to anybody that's even on the fence, try going into this movie and not walking out of the movie theater immediately quoting Spider-Punk.
Absolutely.
He's so good.
Yeah,
no one can do that.
No,
it's
and
impossible.
Honestly, even if you don't like superhero movies, even if you're not usually one for like this genre, go watch it anyways, because it's just a beautiful piece of art that's just illustrating what you can do with animation.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great story about character development and coming into your own, and yeah, it just had a lot of beautiful themes. I loved it. So,
and now to appeal to the Instagram crowd, now we're going to show pictures of all of our spider sonas.
Wait, are we going to edit that? How?